Okay, welcome everyone to our Lunch with the Leaders sessions. Apologies that we're a few minutes late. We're very happy to have Andy Grant, the Fundraising Manager at Sacred Heart Mission, with us today to talk about the great work that Sacred Heart Mission do. We also have Susie Ma with us. Susie is one of our grant program managers in TWS. Sacred Heart Mission are one of the 4 official charities on our workplace giving program chosen by Equity Trustees employees, along with Wildlife Victoria, Ozchild and Purple House. You can find out more about these charities and our workplace giving program on Equity Central, or please feel free to contact a member of HR. There'll be an opportunity for questions at the end, and also please feel free to ask questions via the chat option as well. I'll now hand over to Susie to talk about how Equity Trustees support Sacred Heart Mission and a bit more about workplace giving, and then we'll hear from Andy. So thanks, Susie.
Thanks, Sonny. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians, the land upon which we are meeting, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. The philanthropy team is committed to partnering with those organisations at the front line of the community to build strength and resilience for our most vulnerable members. Our trusted relationships remain at the heart of everything we do, as we aim to walk side by side with the change makers, which leads me to today's session. Equity Trustees has a workplace giving program, which is a way for all of us to contribute to deepening community impact. The mechanics are really simple. You can donate through your pre-tax salary. And this is equally matched by Equity Trustees. This then goes to our workplace giving partners. So you can contact HR and they'll get you sorted. This morning, we're going to hear from our ageing and aged care partner, Sacred Heart Mission. It all starts with a welcome, a meal, a relationship. This is Sacred Heart Mission's invitation, and never before has it been more relevant or vital. Equity Trustees' relationship with Sacred Heart Mission has been long-standing. Most recently, untied COVID emergency funding was granted to support the dining hall and its transition to takeaway meals. The dining hall is the heart and soul of the mission. I'm delighted to introduce you to Andy Grant, the Fundraising Manager at Sacred Heart Mission.
Hi everyone, I'm Andy. I'm the Fundraising Manager at Sacred Heart Mission. So I've been working in the homelessness space for about 8 years now in Victoria, and my work at Sacred Heart Mission simply focuses on raising money for our services to support people in need. A little bit about the mission, and I've just got a little bit of a script, so I'll look over here at my screen, but feel free to, if there's any burning questions that can't wait till the end, please just raise a hand, and I'm sure one of the facilitators will jump in. But yeah, so firstly, I'd just like to say a quick thank you, actually. So thank you to all of you who have ever been involved in supporting our work through grant making, through conversations with funders or anything internal that you've done, and that includes workplace giving as well. So anyone that's taken that step already, it's wonderful to see and very much appreciated by everyone connected to the mission. So thank you. I would also like to acknowledge that the traditional owners of the land in which I come from today, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and note that their land was never ceded. So Sacred Heart Mission started in St Kilda in 1982. It was a local parish priest who opened up the doors of the church to welcome people in for a meal and a chat. What he noticed was the main issues people were facing was around homelessness and employment, and obviously housing and employment, which related to their homelessness. So still 2 very prevalent issues these days. What happened there was all of the meals were created in his house next door by a bunch of volunteers, lovely volunteers, and it became a really well-known and popular meals service very quickly. So what happened was all of the homelessness organisations that are a little bit older than us started sending their workers to us. They'd understand that it was a really popular service where no one was necessarily forced into any homelessness service delivery, and therefore that popularity rose. So those organisations took it upon themselves to send workers down there to mingle with people, to hear their stories, and to try and connect them with the right supports. And that's very much stayed with the mission since. So we quickly became an independent organisation, free from influence from government or church, governed by obviously a board of directors. And what we did was we kept those values really close to our heart. So the value around welcoming people, whoever you are, wherever you're from, whatever your story may be, everyone is welcome at our table, which is obviously that phrase that Susie read out earlier. And it's very much true. That welcoming aspect is the reason why we are we do what we do, and the reason why people still come to us. What started as a dining hall continues today under that same kind of ethos of basically welcoming people in, welcoming anyone in, and not necessarily needing to take any details from them, or and I'll come on to obviously what that means these days with COVID restrictions. Not necessarily take any details from them, but also just enabling them to sit down in a welcoming, non-judgmental space where they feel like they can be safe and connect with people in similar situations, with friends, and obviously with our workers. So that's a little bit about the mission. What started as a dining hall has now become a number of key services, which I'll go through in a bit more detail later. Before I do, if anyone is, obviously we're all working from screens at the moment, so if anyone is on our website, there's a story that we've just released about a man called Peter. So Peter is currently living in our residential aged care service, and he came to the mission, I think about a decade ago. A very well-educated man from Zimbabwe, university educated, came over here and completed 2 degrees with honours before experiencing a relationship breakdown. Something as simple as that affected him in multiple ways, and the lack of a support network really is what drove him to experience homelessness in a way. So it wasn't until he connected with someone delivering a service in Balaclava that he heard about the mission's dining hall, and that's where obviously he received that that welcoming experience and that I've just been explaining, and the meal that he had there was basically the spark that ignited change in his life. He built a relationship with some of the workers in that dining hall, and was quickly supported through to where he now lives, which is his permanent home, his home for life, and a place that's a couple of years ago was rebuilt and refurbished into a 97-bed aged care facility for people who have experienced homelessness and disadvantage in their lives. So the average age of residents in that service is around about 45, close to 50. And that's just because of the aging effects of homelessness on people. So a little bit more about the people we work with. So one of our key messages, or one of the messages I certainly like to share with people who don't know as much about what we do or who we are, is that there's a reason why we and other organisations in this space say people experiencing homelessness, because at the end of the day, they're people. This is a point in their lives where they are experiencing some difficulty, experiencing a particular moment, and it does not define who they are. It doesn't label them as a homeless person, and it doesn't define their lives as a whole. So I think it's a really important message, and one that we've certainly reiterated with quite a few people who we work with in the fundraising team, especially schools, because obviously we feel like we have a role to play in the community too. So where our work differs a little from everyone else. So the organisation I worked with before, Sacred Heart Mission, did a really interesting piece of work around what they called frequent service users. Not a very exciting name, but essentially they looked at a map of everyone that worked in the, everyone that came to them requesting some support. And then took that data and understood who, out of the big circle of everyone who comes to them, who in the middle, who was that small group of people that kept cycling through the system. And this is something that a lot of homelessness organisations wish to understand more. But those people that who receive some support, but it isn't enough to change the trajectory of their experience. And so that's the space that Sacred Heart Mission purposely places itself in. We work with I guess for want of a better term, some of the hardest to reach people. So people who you necessarily can't always find or don't have a stable address, sleeping rough, things like that. But also the hardest to help. So what I mean by that is when you've cycled through the system for years and years, often decades for some of the people we work with, they build up a real distrust in the system, in organisations like us. And that's through no fault of anyone else. I'm not saying we're better than anyone else, but we're kind of, all organisations like us are restricted by certain older forms of government funding. So an example of that would be the workers who are connected to our dining hall are funded for a specific amount of time per individual. So we have a number of workers who will work with people who maybe the first time they've had a meal, like Peter earlier, they would work with him to establish a certain amount of documentation, Medicare, things like that, to help quickly establish a home, and then assess all of the other needs that person has, really to understand a few areas of what they need, but understand how we can actually ensure that they stay out of the homelessness system for good. So our 5 key outcomes when we work with any individual is housing as the first, health and well-being, social participation, economic participation, and independence. So housing at the start and independence at the end, so you've got that full cycle where you can essentially ensure that they don't rely on a service anymore. So just coming back to that 12 or 13 weeks, when you've been working with someone who has experienced homelessness for a decade, maybe 2, maybe more, when you think about what that means for their daily life, when you think about the friends that they have, the places where they go for support, the places where they go for sleep, for entertainment, everything, it would revolve around the street if they're sleeping rough. And so there are a number of barriers, and one of which I'll talk about in a bit more detail is trauma, but a number of barriers that prevent them from that cycle through the homelessness system. So it's our job at an engagement hub, which is what we call our dining hall and our women's house, to build that relationship and build an element of trust that's obviously been broken down over the years, that distrust in services, but the effects that trauma has on that distrust and that person's relationship with others, with other people in the community, with services, with the world around them. So that's where trauma comes into our work. I'm just going to keep rambling on, by the way, so please feel free to stop me at any time, but hopefully this is helpful for context as well. So trauma is a big part of the way we work at Sacred Heart Mission. So we deliver a framework in our client services called trauma-informed care. So everything we do is based around our understanding of trauma and how people experience it. So I think what I'll do is I'll actually read a statement that hopefully can articulate it better than me just talking. But first, to give you a bit more context, I'll share with you my experience of trauma. So my parents split up as a simple story really that most people would have experienced. But my parents split up when I was 11. My dad decided to run away with a woman half his age, and unfortunately that meant that the connection with our family, my sister and I and my mum, was broken, and we never really heard from him again. So we had a network of friends and family, people that supported us to ensure that obviously that didn't affect us longer term. It kept us in our home, it kept us connected to our community, my sister and I in school, and just some simple things that really made a difference to obviously how we got through that trauma or that experience of trauma. So now imagine that one of those parts wasn't there, and that quickly turns into having to leave home, transience, meeting the wrong people, changing schools on a number of times, and unfortunately then it can turn into experiencing abuse when relationships are under extreme stress. I'll read out this statement first, just to give you a bit more context. So our work at Sacred Heart Mission is guided by trauma-informed care. This means every interaction across all our services supports a person's recovery from trauma. This approach includes a person's interaction with our staff, the delivery and type of services we offer, and the physical environment we deliver our services from. So trauma is more complex and severe when it is caused by the actions of other people. At Sacred Heart Mission, we see how a person's mental health is affected by trauma and how trauma can affect people's ability to communicate and connect with others. We see firsthand how a history of violence and relentless danger can affect a person's ability to look after themselves, feel safe, and be connected in healthy ways to other people. Acknowledging violence and its potential lifelong effects helps us understand the challenges faced by people who have experienced trauma, impacting them biologically, socially, and psychologically. We know this because most of the people we support have survived violence and ongoing abuse as children and through their adult lives. So when we meet someone at Sacred Heart Mission Engagement Hub for the first time, so again, a dining hall or a women's house, that'll often be the entry point or the first time we meet a lot of people. So that person is likely to have experienced an average of 21 traumas in their lives. So obviously, just to put that in context to my one experience there, you can see how that would affect someone. So homelessness often starts when people try to get away from danger. Unfortunately, experiencing homelessness also puts people at risk and in danger as well. So trauma affects and prolongs a person's experience of homelessness. It's a vicious cycle, and it constantly leads people down a path where they feel unsafe. When a person is physically and sexually abused by those who are supposed to care for and protect them, it is very difficult to connect with them, and very difficult for someone to support them. So trust, obviously, as I say, is not easily built. The frequency and severity of trauma and the role other people play in that trauma creates fear, and that constant fear is of what others might do to them. So we know how difficult, at Sacred Heart Mission, we know how difficult it is to reach and engage with someone whose life has been profoundly shaped by trauma. But our workers take on that daily challenge. They walk alongside people with large and very diverse histories of trauma, and a high level of need for ongoing training and support is prevalent in the mission, and something that we strive to support our workers on every day. But being trauma-informed is mainly about understanding the massive challenges people face daily. So we aim to meet someone where they're at, and understand what they have to contend with. And just finally, that's quite heavy content, so I apologise if this has been triggering for anyone. But what we know is that people can recover from trauma. As again, when you say a homeless person versus a person experiencing homelessness, it doesn't define who they are. We've learned from people that we serve that the right support and enough stability and safety, people can learn to manage those effects that they have, the effects that trauma has on their lives, sorry. And when a person is understood and given opportunities to be welcomed and included, they can connect meaningfully with others and find ways of contributing to their community. So thank you for bearing with me on that. But I thought it was, I just think it's quite a powerful statement to share. So just a bit more about our dining hall and our women's house. So those two services, as I say, are the entry point there. And we build that relationship and the connection with people to help them understand that, you know, we're not going to force services on them, but we are here to help. It may take one meal, it may take 50 meals, it may take one presentation at the women's house, it may take 50, but or longer. But the idea is that you are welcome, you're part of a community, and that community does not judge you is very important for us. I'll give you a quick update on where we're at with the pandemic as well. So our dining hall had to close, obviously, in March 2020, but we were one of the only meal services for probably the best part of a year that were able to stay open, giving out takeaway meals instead. The difficulty there, obviously, with everything I've just mentioned, when you've got a welcoming space, then suddenly you're turned away, well, not turned away, but provided a meal and told that you can't, you're unable to hang around because of likeliness of infection. So we've done a lot more work around reaching out into the community and providing support to people in the community instead. However, it's obviously really tricky and very much against some of our values as an organisation and a group of individuals when we believe so strongly that welcoming, non-judgmental space and community that we create is affected. So that's still the case for the dining hall, and that's mainly because vaccination rates, they're very difficult to track in the homelessness sector, especially if you're sleeping rough and you don't have a mobile phone. How are you supposed to prove it, even if you do have vaccination? And that's going to be really tricky coming up in throughout the summer when people seek some shelter from the intense heat as well. So often, you know, people use things like libraries, cinemas and swimming pools to get away from the heat, but if they can't prove they're vaccinated, then we've got a big issue on our hands there as well. So the first issue, which is one we're still working on, is building that trust and the relationship to help people get vaccinated as well. But also we're actually just working out ways that we can make sure that people have that respite from the heat coming up soon as well. The women's houses remain closed, but they've turned into a more of an outreach team as well. So keeping connections with people by working through the dining hall and visiting people where they know they currently are living. So again, we've just had to adapt. So a couple of other things very quickly. Where does it lead? So as I said, that 13 weeks of support is really, really tricky for the more pointier end of the homelessness service, for want of a better term, where people don't necessarily have enough time to address all of the things that they might need from us. So we've got a number of longer, medium and long-term programs to address those. There are limits to the number that we can, number of services we can deliver, or the number of people that can access those, depending on funding. But two I'd just like to mention at the moment is one which we call Greenlight. So Greenlight was a program set up in the wake of the pandemic or during, and it's supporting people to exit motels those people who were sleeping rough were placed into hotels throughout the pandemic by the Victorian government, understanding that they needed a safe place to stay. So wonderful work to actually, you know, keep people safe. However, they understood that obviously it didn't stop there and that we needed to make sure that they're not exiting it back onto the streets after that. So our program Greenlight came up and provided people with an opportunity to transition to a more permanent home, and we provide the support in that, which can last up to a year. And the second one is called Journey to Social Inclusion. So that's 60 people a year over a 3-year period. providing intensive support one-on-one for all of those 5 key outcomes I mentioned. So housing, health and wellbeing, social participation, economic participation, and independence. So there's just a little bit of a gap that we're looking at, not a little bit, quite a big one actually, but a gap at the moment between our engagement hubs and one of those longer term programs. Not everyone needs to access such a longer term program like Journey to Social Inclusion, but there's a gap of that 12-week funding, but what else is required to actually end someone's experience of homelessness, because we don't want to see people cycle through the system. So we're just working on a couple of ideas at the moment, but a big project is well on its way, which we call Continuum of Care, providing a continuum of care that is catered to each individual's need. So they are provided the right amount of support that and the right number of support systems, and it's all based around a series of questions and conversations that we have with people. So that's us in a nutshell. I don't think I need to go on much more. It's 12:30, but that's the breadth of the organisation. There's a lot of innovation within that around our buildings, around the Journey to Social Inclusion, and around this next project, Continuum of Care. But ultimately, we're in the game to make sure we end chronic homelessness. So I hope that's been helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. That's fantastic. We've just got a couple of questions, so I'm just conscious of time. But the first question is the Heart of St Kilda concert on this year?
It's surprising how many people know about the concert. Actually, it's such a great sort of shop front for everything that this place is about. So it's not on probably until September next year. We just we did a bit of an assessment and just understood that, you know, with the goodwill of the performers doing the show for free, we wouldn't want to ask that of them this side of the end of the financial year. So it will be something that we schedule in for the first half of the next financial year. But it's not going anywhere, it's coming back. Great.
And just in terms of donations and things, have they been heavily impacted during the last 2 years?
So I recently went to a fundraising event and spoke about this, and have been speaking about this for a while, but I think that depends on the activities that the fundraising team does. I've saw some organizations say that they lost a lot of income through donations, but at the same time they made a decision not to go out with appeals and scale back certain things. Obviously events were affected, but we can always continue to communicate our need, and that's the role that fundraisers play. So our events were of course hit, so I think overall we had a deficit of about 500,000, but we did a few things, certainly an emergency appeal. Back at the start of the pandemic, you know, when you were told to do, like, you know, socially distance, go see the doctor if you're unwell, you know, practice good hygiene, and that was the obvious thing for us. It was, well, if you're sleeping rough, how are you supposed to do any of those? So that was quite an easy thing to articulate, and something that helps us bridge that gap. So we've been flexible in how we communicate our fundraising activities, and obviously making sure that our services are still well funded.
Great, thank you. All right, just due to time, we'll end there. So thank you so much to Andy and Susie for joining us, and we hope that this has given a bit of inspiration for our employees to, you know, jump on board and get involved in our workplace giving program. You'll find all the information on Equity Central, but please feel free to contact HR if you need any further information or access to the form. So thank you to everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.